The night cracked open with a single message that shouldn't have existed, a whisper of danger carrying a name long buried in silence. I felt the air shift as my phone buzzed again, each vibration pulsing like a warning I didn't yet understand. Shadows slid across the room while I read the words, and every line pulled me deeper into a past I had promised to forget. Someone was watching, someone who knew the truth I had worked years to erase, someone who wanted me to face it now. My pulse hammered as the final message appeared, a threat disguised as a reminder, a promise wrapped in quiet cruelty. By the time I looked up from the screen, I already sensed it. Nothing in my life would remain the same after tonight. I woke before sunrise, startled by the faint echo of footsteps outside my window, a sound too deliberate to ignore. The neighborhood was usually silent at this hour, yet that steady rhythm crawled under my skin like a warning I couldn't shake. I pushed aside the curtain, expecting emptiness, but a lone figure stood across the street with their hood pulled low. They weren't moving, just watching, as if waiting for me to make the first mistake that would reveal everything I tried to hide. A cold breath slipped from my chest as I stepped back, refusing to blink, afraid they would vanish the moment I looked away. I grabbed my phone, but the screen only showed that same unknown number that had sent the messages last night. No new texts, no calls, only the quiet reminder that someone had already stepped too far into my life. I typed a reply, asking who they were, demanding answers, but my thumb froze before I pressed send. If they wanted me scared, they had succeeded, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I deleted the message and slipped the phone into my pocket, trying to convince myself that fear wasn't already winning. Outside, the street seemed emptier than before, and the figure had disappeared without a sound or a trace of movement. I locked the door behind me despite the growing daylight, feeling the weight of the unseen settling onto my shoulders. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop, hoping distraction would steady my thoughts, but the screen flickered unnaturally. A file I didn't recognize appeared in the corner, its title a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in 5 years. Elias. The sound of it echoed through my mind like a wound reopening, sharp and uninvited, dragging me back to everything I ran from. I clicked the file with trembling fingers, half hoping it was a mistake, half knowing it couldn't be anything but intentional. Inside was a single photo, taken the night everything fell apart, a moment I thought I destroyed along with my old life. But there it was, untouched and worse, updated with a new timestamp from just 3 hours ago. Someone had been there, close enough to capture it again, close enough to make sure I understood their message without words. I slammed the laptop shut as panic burst inside me like a sudden storm swallowing all sense of safety. The walls felt narrower, the house too quiet, the air too heavy with the knowledge that I was no longer hidden. I tried to steady my breathing, but the truth pressed harder with every passing second, refusing to let me look away. Whoever had sent the messages knew about Elias, knew what happened, and knew why I had tried to disappear. I glanced at the window again, half expecting the hooded figure to return, half dreading they already stood closer than I realized. The morning light felt thin and useless as I understood one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a warning. It was the beginning. I left the house with my keys clenched so tightly my knuckles burned, afraid the silence behind me might turn into footsteps. The street looked normal, painfully normal, as if the night's messages had been a dream I wasn't allowed to wake from. I checked every window on the block, searching for the hooded figure, but only empty driveways stared back at me. Still, the hairs on my arms rose, as though someone watched from a place I couldn't quite see or understand. I forced myself toward my car, replaying the photo in my mind, the timestamp pulsing like a heartbeat I didn't want. Elias' name kept echoing, louder with each step, dragging fragments of memories I had buried under years of silence. The night he disappeared. The accusation that tore my life apart. The promise I made never to return. I gripped the steering wheel, willing my hands to stop shaking, but the tremor spread like a warning I couldn't ignore. I drove to the only person who still knew pieces of the truth, someone I had promised never to contact again. Marion lived on the edge of town, hidden among quiet roads and overgrown fences that swallowed most of the sunlight. She opened the door before I knocked, her eyes sharp with the kind of fear that recognized itself in someone else. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing over my shoulder as if she expected danger to follow me inside. I stepped past her without speaking, unable to trust my voice when the truth pressed so tightly against my throat. She locked the door twice, then a third time, her fingers trembling like she already knew why I had come. "What did you find?" she asked, folding her arms as though bracing for impact. I pulled up the photo on my phone, letting her see the timestamp, the angle, the way it captured the moment perfectly. Her face drained of color, her breath catching as she pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from letting fear escape. "This can't be real," she whispered, but the crack in her voice proved she knew it was. I told her about the messages, the figure outside my house, the file that appeared as if someone walked straight through my walls. Marion paced the room, each step echoing like a countdown none of us could stop or slow. "He's not supposed to be part of your life anymore," she said softly, as though Elias could hear through the walls. I swallowed hard, remembering the night she helped me leave, the night everything spiraled into a truth too dangerous to speak. "What if someone knows what really happened?" I asked, the fear finally breaking through my ribs like a rising tide. Marion stopped packing, her eyes meeting mine with a sharpness that felt like a blade pressed against honesty. "They don't just know," she said quietly. "They want you to answer for it." My pulse stumbled, a heavy dread settling into my bones as the room seemed to close around us. I felt the truth shift, darker now, as if a door behind my memories had opened without my permission. Whoever had resurfaced Elia's name wasn't looking for answers. They were looking for me. I left Marion's house with a weight pressing down like a storm cloud ready to break. Every street looked the same, quiet and empty, but I knew the danger lurked in the shadows. My car engine roared to life, but even the familiar sound felt wrong. Like it belonged to someone else. I drove aimlessly, unsure where safety existed anymore, unsure if safety existed at all. My phone buzzed again, the same unknown number flashing like a neon warning against the dark interior. I opened it with trembling fingers, expecting threats, expecting nothing, and found a location instead. It was nearby, only a few blocks away, marked with a single word: "Remember." I hesitated, knowing every instinct screamed to turn away, yet my curiosity and guilt pulled me forward. The streets narrowed as I approached, buildings casting long shadows that reached for the car like dark fingers. I parked and stepped out, feeling the night breathe against my skin, thick with anticipation. The address led me to an abandoned warehouse, windows cracked, doors hanging on rusted hinges. I pushed the door open slowly, the sound echoing across the empty space like a challenge. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything, yet I could see shapes moving just beyond my vision. A single light flickered in the center, weak, but enough to reveal a figure waiting. It was Elias, or at least someone who wore his face in memories too painful to ignore. He stepped forward, each movement measured, deliberate, testing my reaction like a predator sizing prey. "You came," he said, voice low and smooth, but there was something sharp behind it I couldn't place. I froze, heart hammering, the words catching in my throat, fear and recognition twisting together. "Why now?" I whispered, barely audible, afraid my voice would shatter the fragile balance of the room. "You never left," he said, eyes locked on mine, searching for guilt, for fear, for the truth. I swallowed hard, trying to remember what I had buried, what I thought I had destroyed, what I had run from. The warehouse seemed to close in as the air thickened, the shadows moving closer with every word spoken. "You can't hide from this," he said, taking another step forward, and I felt the weight of history pressing down. Every mistake, every secret, Every decision that led me here felt alive, accusing, impossible to ignore. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs refused to obey, anchored by memories I had tried to erase. He circled slowly, watching, testing, reminding me of nights I wished never existed. "You think the past dies with silence," he said, voice sharper now, almost cruel. "It doesn't, it waits." I clenched my fists, feeling the tension rise until it burned, a mixture of anger and fear I couldn't separate. "Then tell me what you want," I said, voice breaking under the weight of every secret I carried. He smiled faintly, a cruel, knowing curl of lips, and the warehouse seemed to exhale around us. "You already know," he said simply, stepping into the flickering light fully, revealing the truth I had feared most. I felt the ground shift beneath me, reality tilting, as the confrontation I had run from finally began. Nothing could prepare me for what came next, and I knew with certainty I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I stumbled backward, heart racing, as Elias stepped closer, eyes never leaving mine, searching for weakness. The warehouse walls seemed to pulse with every breath, the shadows stretching long, ready to consume. I tried to speak, but my voice caught, thick with fear and guilt I could no longer deny. "You can't escape what you did," he said, voice low, precise, cutting through the silence like a knife. I shook my head, desperate to push the past away, desperate to erase the moments that haunted him. But his presence was heavier than memory, pulling me into a reckoning I had avoided for years. "You think hiding changes anything," he said, circling, each step echoing like judgment against my chest. I wanted to run, but the door was too far, the darkness too near, and my courage too thin to move. The single flickering light revealed every scar on my conscience, every choice I had tried to forget. "You hurt people," he said, each word deliberate, forcing me to relive nights I buried deep. My hands shook as I tried to steady myself, to find words that would make him leave, make this end. But nothing could undo the past, nothing could soften the consequences etched into our lives. He stopped suddenly, close enough that I could feel his breath, cold and precise, like judgment incarnate. "I didn't come back for revenge," he said, and my chest tightened, expecting something worse. "But to remind you what happens when silence protects guilt," he continued, eyes hard and unyielding. I swallowed, feeling the weight of truth pressing, heavier than fear, heavier than any threat before. "You thought no one would know," he said, voice barely above a whisper, yet cutting sharper than a scream. I could only nod, unable to deny the years spent hiding, running, pretending it never existed. "The world doesn't forget," he said, stepping back slightly, letting the silence stretch between us. Every shadow seemed alive, moving with his words, echoing my fear and regret through the empty space. "I came back to make you face it," he said, eyes locking on mine, burning with the certainty I had fled. I took a shaky breath, realizing the confrontation wasn't just about him, but everything I had tried to bury. The warehouse felt smaller, the darkness closer, as the weight of past actions settled on my shoulders. "I don't know if I can," I whispered, voice trembling, barely audible over the hum of the flickering light. "You can," he said softly, almost kindly, but his gaze left no room for lies or excuses. I nodded again, swallowing hard, my throat tight, heart hammering, the reality of my past finally undeniable. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the center of the room, where the light flickered, revealing an old crate. Inside lay evidence, reminders, pieces of a story I had hoped would never return to light. "You have to make this right," he said, voice steady, and I realized the confrontation had only begun. I felt the first true weight of responsibility, knowing every choice from here on would define whether I survived or was consumed. The night closed in around us, heavy, unyielding, but also undeniable, a reckoning I could no longer avoid. I stared at the crate, hands hovering above its surface, knowing every item inside carried a fragment of my past. The flickering light cast sharp shadows, making the contents look more like accusations than reminders. I opened it slowly, each movement measured, as if rushing would destroy what little courage I had left. Inside were papers, photos, and objects I had hidden away, each one a key to a memory I had tried to erase. I picked up a photo, hands trembling, seeing faces I had loved and lost, all intertwined with my mistakes. Elias watched silently, allowing me to confront it alone, his presence heavy yet patient. The letters came next, folded neatly, written in handwriting I recognized but had not seen in years. Each line tore at me, revealing truths I had avoided. Lies I had told, and promises I had broken. I realized the crate wasn't just a collection. It was a mirror, reflecting everything I had buried. Fear mixed with guilt, tightening around my chest, each breath a struggle against panic and shame. I dropped the letters onto the floor, unable to hold the weight, my mind spinning with memories and regrets. "You have to face them," Elias said quietly, and his words cut sharper than any anger I had imagined. I nodded, swallowing hard, knowing that denial had carried me only so far, and now I had reached the end. I pulled out an envelope marked with my name, heavier than the rest, sealed with a red wax stamp. Inside was a document, legal and official, exposing mistakes and decisions I had tried to hide for too long. I read it slowly, each word hammering me with consequences I had ignored, warnings I had dismissed. The full weight of my actions pressed down, and for the first time, I felt the truth in its purest, terrifying form. Elias didn't speak, letting the silence stretch, letting me feel the enormity of the past closing in. I glanced at him, searching for judgment, for anger, for revenge, but found only a cold, unwavering clarity. "This is your chance," he said, voice steady, "to correct what you broke, to make something right for once." I shook my head slightly, unsure if the chance was enough, unsure if I had the strength to take it. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the crate, as if guiding me toward responsibility I had avoided. "The past doesn't forgive, but it gives opportunity," he said, eyes locked on mine, unwavering and precise. I took a deep breath, the first intentional one in hours, trying to steady the storm of fear and doubt inside. I began sorting the contents, separating memories from evidence, lies from truths, fear from determination. Each item I touched brought clarity, a small step toward reclaiming control over what had been lost. Hours passed unnoticed as I worked, cataloging, understanding, confronting every piece of the life I left behind. By the time I finished, sweat and exhaustion weighed on me, but there was also a flicker of resolve, fragile yet real. Elias stepped back, letting me stand alone amidst the remnants of my past, a silent witness to my reckoning. "You've started," he said quietly. "Now continue. Don't let it end here." I nodded, heart heavy yet resolute, knowing the real battle had just begun, but also that I could no longer run. The night outside pressed against the warehouse walls, but inside, I found the first trace of control I had lost years ago. I left the warehouse carrying a folder of evidence, my hands still shaking from hours of confrontation. The night was colder now, wind slicing through the streets, but I felt a strange clarity I hadn't known before. Elias followed silently, walking just a step behind, his presence steady, unwavering, a reminder of the past I couldn't ignore. Every shadow seemed less threatening, replaced by a tense awareness of responsibility I had finally accepted. I drove through the empty streets, each turn bringing memories I had tried to bury, now impossible to avoid. Phone messages kept buzzing, unknown numbers, familiar names, all reminders that the world wouldn't pause for me. I ignored them, focusing on the folder in my lap, the truths I had to confront, and the steps I had to take. By sunrise, I arrived at the courthouse, the building looming large, official, indifferent to my fear. Inside, people moved with purpose, unaware of the storm I carried in the small folder beneath my coat. I signed in, met with clerks and officers, each interaction a test of courage I wasn't sure I possessed. I handed over the folder, watching them examine each paper, each photo, each shred of evidence I had preserved. The weight of accountability pressed harder, but I felt a strange release in finally letting it be seen. Elias stood nearby, silent, his eyes sharp, but softer now, almost approving of the steps I had taken. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly, and I understood he meant more than the legal process. I nodded, swallowing hard, realizing my life was shifting, the path ahead uncertain but no longer hidden. I left the courthouse feeling lighter, yet the echoes of past mistakes followed me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Every corner of the city reminded me of choices, of secrets, of consequences that had shaped who I was. But for the first time, I believed I could face them, not with fear but with purpose, with clarity. I returned to my apartment, the sun rising slowly, painting the walls with golden light that felt almost sacred. The phone buzzed again, but this time I didn't flinch. I knew some things required facing, others required ignoring. I set it aside, pouring coffee, taking a long, steadying breath, feeling the first calm since the messages began. Elias lingered for a moment, then nodded, as if trusting me to continue this path alone. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear, knowing the past would always follow but not control me. I opened the window, letting the morning air sweep through, carrying the weight of night and the promise of day. I thought of the crate, of the evidence, of every secret I had confronted, and felt a small spark of resolve. This wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a beginning, a chance to rewrite the story I had long feared. I made a promise to myself, quiet but firm, to continue facing what I had hidden, no matter how painful. The world outside buzzed with life, unaware of the reckoning I had survived, unaware of the courage it took. I sipped my coffee, feeling strength return slowly, the tremors fading into determination and focus. Elias had left, the night behind me, but the lessons remained, guiding me toward responsibility and truth. I knew the days ahead would challenge me, but for the first time, I felt ready, aware, unafraid to step forward. The sun climbed higher, lighting the streets, and I walked into it, folder in hand, ready to face what came next. Weeks passed, and the weight of the past began to settle, no longer crushing, but a guide I had to follow. I returned to the warehouse one last time, alone, to confront the silence and the memories it held. The crate was empty now, everything accounted for, yet the echoes of what had happened lingered in the air. I touched the edge of the wooden box, feeling the texture, the history, the lessons it carried for me. Outside, the city moved on unaware, but I felt different, changed by every choice and every truth I faced. Elias had disappeared, leaving only the knowledge that some reckoning must be done by oneself. I walked through the streets, aware of shadows, but no longer afraid, carrying clarity instead of guilt. Every step felt deliberate, a commitment to face what came next without hiding, without running. I kept the lessons close, the memories sharp, knowing they would guide me through challenges ahead. The past would not vanish, but it would no longer control me, no longer dictate my life in silence. I paused at the corner where it all began, breathed deeply, and felt a weight lift from my chest. The sun dipped low, painting the city gold, a quiet promise that endings were also beginnings. I turned, folder in hand, walking forward, ready to live with honesty, courage, and the truths I now owned.